Hey AV Fine Art Families, it's Kristen. Today we're going to go over this beautiful holiday wreath drawing. So if you have your art box, that's this box that came in your mailbox filled with all of the supplies you need for the project, go ahead and get those out. You're probably going to want to have water in your water well ready. But all the paints, all that you can set aside. If you don't have an art box, no big deal, because this would be beautiful in pencil, in marker. Any medium you want to work with is great. So if you don't have a box, make sure you have a pencil handy and a piece of paper. And it could be just drawing paper, or it could be maybe like a Bristol board. If you want to do something a little bit more finished, you might want something a little bit thicker. But you're also going to want some sketch paper handy, because we're going to go over a couple little things before we put this whole wreath together. So just a couple things that we see in this composition. One of them is the holly, and holly is really simple, and this would be cute to add a little flourish or embellishment to any kind of Christmas tag or holiday gift that you give. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create this little sloped line here, and then I'm going to do two little peaks, 1, 2 peaks, and bring a point to the end of that line. Then I'm going to repeat it on the other side. So peak, peak, down. So practice this a little bit. You could be a little more fancy with it. But on your sketch paper, you might want to do a couple of these just to make sure you feel really confident with that holly. And again, this is really cute. You could add that to a note card or something. Sign your name next to little holly. Be cute. The pine is really, really simple. You're just going to do the same thing. So it doesn't have to be a straight line. A little bit of a curved, anything organic is really nice. And then once I have that line on there, I'm just going to flick my pencil or marker or whatever you're using out away. So kind of like a palm frond, if you've drawn palm trees with me before, I do something really similar. So these short little hatches coming out of the side is going to create that pine effect. And then the last thing is all this branching. And so for the branching, you're just going to want to create sort of parallel lines that get skinnier as they come to an end, because a branch would be skinnier as it's further away from the main piece. And then you can add little branches off. So I'm just adding lines here, here. And then because this is curved, you might want to just practice. I'm going to curve one around here. Curve to a point. Maybe add some more branching off either side. And you can even get like a little curly at the end if you want to be really wild. So those are the 3 items that are inside the wreath, and we're going to put those together for our final composition. So if you're at home, you can just go freehand with this, or you can grab 2 plates, a small plate and a larger plate, or anything that you have that you can make a nice circle with. So I have 2 plates that came in my art box, and so I'm going to do the big one first, and you'll put the big one down. Trace around it. You want to start with your biggest plate first. So whatever fits on your paper. If you're going really big, you could even use a dinner plate. So big plate first, and then I'm going to take a smaller plate, basically using it like a stencil, and put that in the center. So if you need to go find a plate, just pause right now, go find what you need that's going to fit, and then you can just press play again and catch up from there. But basically, we just want this ring here that we can work around, and it's pretty faint. Probably for you, but you don't want it super dark, because you're going to want to be able to erase a lot of those lines later. You don't want them like really bold, because it's going to look silly. We want it to look like the wreath is made of this willow or vine. So I'm going to start with my drawing. I'm going to start with the holly at the base. So I actually offset my circle a little. I didn't put it right in the middle of my page, because I just wanted it to have a little bit more of an organic feel. But I'm going to start with my holly. The sample has 4 leaves, but you put as many as you want. And you don't have to put them at the bottom if you want to put it to the side, wherever you feel is kind of like the crescendo of the wreath is So you might want it over here on the side. That looks really pretty too, but I'm going to put mine at the bottom, a little bit more like the sample. And then I'm going to do 3. The sample has 4, but I'm a rebel. Not really, not most things, but with art I'm a little bit of a rebel. And then I'm going to put those berries in the center. So you're working with pencil, which means you could erase the lines that go through the center of that berry. And you probably want to do that just to kind of keep it clean as you go. You could even erase any of those lines from that ring that showed through that holly right now. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and start adding my branching. So I'm going to use that ring that I made as kind of the base that I'm working off of. And I want to keep this really organic. So I'm going to add my branching almost like it's wrapping around this invisible, hopefully invisible, wreath or ring that we made. So you can have fun with this. Just think about like these would be wrapping around each other to create that wreath effect. So if you've ever seen a willow wreath or a grapevine wreath, they kind of wrap around each other to create that ring. And so you're going to want to do that. And then as it comes up here, maybe a little bit thinner, more stylized. But again, just kind of feel this out for yourself, wherever you want to put these little bits of branches, wherever you think they'd wrap around each other. And you can always add more later. So right now we're getting a base on, but that doesn't mean you can't go back later and add more of these little branches, like maybe a little interest going off the sides. We just want something to start with. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop, and I'm going to add on my pine, and then I'm probably going to add a little bit more branching. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start down here at the base and start adding some curved lines coming out anywhere I think I'm going to have a lot of pine. So I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add those little lines. So I'm using Sharpie just so you can see it, but I'm not going to be able to erase anything I don't like. But if you feel like you don't like the way things are overlapping, go ahead and erase anything that is in your way. And then just really like fill this area up with that pine. Again, though, thinking that it's kind of curving around this wreath. So you want to just keep building up. And then the sample has it getting real thin towards the top, which I think looks really pretty. If you have your like holly over here on the side, maybe have the area over here be that thinner area. It just adds a little bit more interest. And if you're using like a colored pencil or a marker, acrylic to do this, you really don't have to worry about all those pencil lines. But if you are going to watercolor with me, you do want to think about as you go getting rid of some of that in that ring, just because watercolor is a translucent media, and you'll see all of the pencil lines. So you'll see the ones you like and the ones you don't like. And it's more of a style preference. Some people really like seeing all the pencil lines through. But if you think you're not going to want to see all those, you might want to just start to erase as you go. Because once your paper is wet, it's really hard to get in there with the eraser. So I'm going to add a few more. And have fun with it. It should be fun and whimsical. So I have that on there. Now I'm just going to add some more lines and add those berries. So anywhere you want a little touch of red, you're going to want to add these extra twigs, the berries at the end. So some of them will make sense where they naturally go. We have some in here. And you can go in and add, like I think I want a little pine in here. Kind of coming back the other direction. So go ahead and add as many berries as you think you want for yours. And then we're gonna go ahead and start painting. So if you have your painting supplies, follow along. If you don't, you can use any medium you want. And I mean, you could turn me off now and do it yourself, or you could kind of follow along with the order I'm going to be adding color to this project. So I got in my art kit my palette, and these are paste paints. So they are watercolor paste, but they're dried in the palette, and I want to be reactivating these right now. So I'm going to use my larger brush, and I'm going to just start to move water over to my paints so that they start to activate. So just clean, clear water. Let's see if I can get one going. I'm putting it in there, and then as soon as the water touches the paint, it starts to activate that paint, and that water becomes my watercolor. So it doesn't take a ton. You could always add more water later. We just want to start waking up those colors. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of these. And you should be doing the same with that bigger brush. And your brushes are brand new, so if they're a little stiff, just wiggle them on your tissue paper or get them in that water and soften them up a little bit. The original composition of this has a blue background, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, but you can always leave it white. And this would actually be kind of neat to put a little poem or saying, or just simply like joy in the middle of the wreath would look really pretty. If you are really good at scripting, that would look really good. Or a verse that's meaningful for you, that would look really nice. So I'm going to just create a little bit of a wash of blue in the background that's going to help my wreath stand out as a composition. So I'm going to wet the paper. Now I'm sure you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm taking clean, clear water, and I'm going around the edges of my wreath. I just want to create kind of a pretty cloudy feel around it, like you'd have in an illustration. And once that's wet, that's called sizing or priming the paper. I'm going to grab my paints, and you guys can see like that water is already light blue. I don't want to grab a big thick chunk of paint. I just want that watercolor that's next to that thing of blue there. And I'm going to just start to add this little bit of blue around the edges. So I don't want this too dark. If you like stuff dramatic, then go wild. But if you feel like it's getting a little too dark, just grab a little bit more water on your brush and then soften that out. So this blue is just a really soft sky blue. I'm just going to bring it around the edges. So this is something you'd want to do around the entire ring of your wreath if you want that effect. So you would just rinse out your brush when you're done with that section, wet another section around the outside of your wreath, get a little more blue, and keep going. And this shouldn't be super dark. If you're working with acrylics, you might want to just skip this step, or you might want to add a lot of white to your blue, just so it has that soft look. It's really hard with acrylics to get that same kind of foggy, soft look you can get with wet to wet with watercolors. So imagine I've finished the background, and then I'm going to move on. So I'm going to first do all of the branching. So you have a smaller brush, looks like this in your kit if you have that. If not, grab one of your small brushes. You could also use, pastel would be really cool on this. I'm just going to throw out a bunch of mediums, whatever you have at home. So I'm going to do the branching next with the brown. So my brown has been activated already. I did that beforehand. And I'm going to go around and get all of my branches in. And it's okay if they go over your pine for right now, because those are all going to kind of weave in and out of each other. But this small brush is great for getting in all these areas. So any brush you have, you can usually get a pretty thin line, and it's more about how much pressure you use than the actual brush you have. So for example, with a brush, this skinny little brush, I can get this thick line like that, or I can get like a really thin line. And it's really just how much pressure I'm using. I'm using the tip of the brush. I'm getting all of these lines in. And so even the little tiny ones, the berries are off. You're going to go in and just get all of those little branches in with that brown. And the next thing we're going to do is the pine. So you have two greens. If you have your palette, you could grab two different green markers, crayons, oil pastels. But I want to make sure those are both really activated. And I'm going to use the lighter green and my yellow ochre for the pine, because I want that to look a little bit different than the holly. So there's my yellow ochre. I'm going to bring a little bit more green in. Ooh, that one's real strong. That's okay. I want them to all look different. So if your little twigs are still wet, they're probably going to run into your color a little bit. That's wet and watercolor. I kind of like that because it looks a little bit more organic, but you can always let your wreath dry a little bit before you go in with the pine. To swirl that paint a little bit more. So when you have the water in your little well and you feel like maybe it's a little bit too light, just swirl up that paint a little bit. There's a ton of that thick watercolor paint in there. You just need to make sure you're activating a little more of it. So I'm just following the same lines I did when I drew the pine. I'm flicking my brush up and then out, 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 out. And you're going to continue to do this until all of your pine areas are covered. Use a little bit of that darker green in some of them. Dripping. So when I'm teaching at an easel, I'm always going to have some drippage. That's really normal because I'm vertical here, but if you're working on a flat surface, you won't have any of that. Do wait though until your art is really dry to move it. So imagine I finished all the pine. And you can always pause if you need more time. That's the great thing about the videos. You can pause me and say, slow down. I'm rinsing out my brush and I'm going to go in with just the darker green that I have. So I had those two greens. And because I want to get a lot of color going on there, I'm just going to swirl, swirl, swirl. And the watercolor, if you have the palettes, when you're done with this, you can actually let whatever's left in there dry and you can use those again. But I'm going to paint the holly next. So I'm going to still use my little brush. You can use the larger brush if you want to. These are pretty big areas. And if you feel like you want it more of a turquoise, add a little bit of your blue. That's really pretty. Ooh, that might be too much. Oh, I like it. And you can always glaze. So if you let your watercolors dry, like these ones are all dry, I could go back over them again with another layer of watercolor. That's called glazing, and that's going to add a little bit of depth, and it's also going to bring that value of shade darker. So you can let it dry, and you can go back over it and add a little bit more to it. And then the last thing you're going to do is go around and do your little berries. So I like to leave a little tiny bit of white. So what I will usually do, I don't know if you can see, it's too small, but what I usually do is I'll do like a little circle, and that leaves my white shine mark, and then I paint around it. Sorry. So that's one thing you can do when you're painting those, if you want to leave that little tiny bit of a shine mark. Like make a little circle, circle, paint around it, paint around it. And just adds a little bit more interest to your painting. So when this is all finished, you have to send me a photo of it, whatever medium you use. It's going to look beautiful no matter what. This is a fun family project. This would be a really great like parent-kid, grandparent-kid art project, because I think it kind of like is something that everybody can get excited about. This is super, super cute. If you have questions, you can always message me. I'm happy to answer any questions you have or be as much help as I can. But I hope you enjoy this project. If you have the art box, you're going to find this little tub inside the box. This is actually an acrylic paint, and it's a glitter effect. So on the top, you're going to see it's like a cute little glittery spot. That's what this looks like when it's dry. So Miss Susan put this in here. I know on her sample she added it to the holly branches, but you want to make sure that this is completely dry before you try and put the acrylic paint on top, because if not, it's going to pick up the color. It's going to get goopy and gross. But if you wait until this is dry, you can take this acrylic paint and brush it anywhere you want, just a little festive glitter. I think it would look really cute, just kind of even flowing here and there, just in those branches for a little bit of a sparkle. If you're using this paint, don't forget to wash your brush out after, because acrylic paint, when it dries in the brush, just becomes plastic and your brush is toast. So take care of your brushes, don't leave acrylic paint inside of it, and make sure that you don't use this until this is completely done and dried. So I hope you enjoyed this time with me. I had fun painting this project, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.